good to go. Yes, as Patrick said, my name is Sean Powell. I'm Director of Expedition Operations with Seabourn Expeditions, and I've been going to Antarctica since 1999, every year except the first year of the pandemic. I've spent over 2 years of my life in Antarctica in totality, and that means I've spent over a year just crossing the Drake Passage back and forth. So for all of its infamy, I can tell you I'm living proof you get through it, and most of the time it's not that bad actually. The infamy of the Drake Passage actually comes from the time where tall ships were going around the Horn, and they of course are under wind power and they're fighting against the prevailing systems. Sometimes it would take them months, literally months, to get around Cape Horn before the Straits of Magellan were discovered. If you ever want to learn a bit more about that, look for a film by Captain Irving Johnson out of Mystic Seaport in the museum there called, aptly, Around Cape Horn. And it is stunning. Narration by him, it's incredible. He was on the last of the flying key line. An incredible story, incredible man, and an incredible sailor. The story you just mentioned about taking penguins home, Kristen was chuckling because actually someone did try that recently. A woman from Japan, she was on a ship, not our ship, but she was on another ship that went to South Georgia, and she went ashore with a big dry backpack, empty, and then grabbed a penguin chick, put it in the backpack, somehow totally unaware by the expedition team. She got back on board the ship. The ship is sailing back to the Falkland Islands. It's about a 3-day sail, so it's a bit of a jaunt to get over there. And she had the do not disturb sign on her door. But by the third day, the steward was starting to worry. There was a little bit of smell, and they kept hearing these noises when she was outside the cabin. So they went in there, and she put the poor penguin chick underneath her mattress in the bed frame. And that, of course, created quite a hullabaloo. And the ship had to turn around and go back to South Georgia and release this bird. So it made everybody wait for their flights, and it's a problem. So we don't endorse taking the wildlife home with you. But Antarctica as a whole is the most popular destination in the
I definitely had some
expedition
expectations,
industry. Here's a testimonial
but I was
from one of our guests.
blown away pretty much from day one. I realized that my expectations were absolutely nothing like what the reality was. And I know that probably sounds like an advertisement, but it really has blown me away. I was very stressed out before I got on the ship from excess work, just like everybody is. And when I came here, I felt like I was coming home. I felt like I found my soul again.
It's like coming home. And what it adds to the experience is the fact that you feel comfortable as soon as you step on the boat.
From the first second that you put your foot on the Seabourn ship, you feel good. It's never average, it's always a little bit more.
We were a bit skeptical about cruising, and we weren't sure that we would really like it. And now, looking back, it was such a good decision.
Eating is more than just feeding your body, more than just consuming the food in front of you. For me, eating and enjoying an eating experience has to be a total experience. And we get that with every meal on Seabourn.
With Seabourn, it's just an amazing experience. It's really opened our eyes to expedition cruising. What we felt was the same energy, was the same spirit, was the same service.
So smart.
Yes, it was so smart.
And the sweets are amazing. I can't talk enough about how amazing the sweets are and how we love to just sit in our sleep and watch the sea go by.
Kayaking was just mind-blowing, and the only thing you hear is the crashing of an iceberg when it splits away.
Seabourn.
That testimonial, or series of testimonials, was meant to introduce not only the Seabourn product for those that are new to Seabourn brand, but also the expedition product. And I understand from what I've been told that most of you are here because you're interested in Antarctica as a whole. But I thought I can't tell the story of Antarctica without also telling the story of expedition cruising in general. So to kick things off, we'll go back in time a little bit. I started in expedition cruising in 1997. Had never heard of this before. It sounded like a make-believe job when I sent off my application for it, but I was working for Shell Petroleum at the time on platforms in the Gulf and in the North Sea, and I was looking for something that was going to be a little bit more fun and a little bit more interesting to the people I was working with. because I was on the science team on the platform, and most of the riggers don't really care that I found something interesting at the bottom of the drill site. And in fact, they're usually a little bit leery if I found something interesting, because that might mean that we were going to stop production for a little bit. And I discovered this small ship that was working in Alaska. And I went up there and I was hooked, because everyone that I sailed with was just as enthusiastic. It was like being in a classroom where every student wants to be there. And since then, I've had the opportunity to travel around the globe. Antarctica is the place I've worked the most, as you heard before, but I've worked everywhere from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and virtually everywhere in between. All those sites that you saw in there are places that I've been on the ships or leading expeditions in the past. And I just need this to stop advancing without me. Give me 1 second here. Don't want to end it. I'll just keep going backwards on it when it tries to move. So the expedition product, when I started in Antarctica, there were 7 ships going down there, 7 in total. And since then, this year, there'll be over 60 vessels going down. And amongst those, or in addition to those 60, we'll have another 30, 35 yachts going down. So you can tell how much Antarctica has grown in just the last 25 years as a destination, as an interest to travelers. And that's in part, has certainly been helped by the advent of social media and the imagery that Patrick was showing just then, people are sharing on Facebook, on Instagram, and everything else. But it's also grown because the industry has recognized what it needs to succeed down there. And that's where it come to these 2 ships. When I started, I was on a retrofitted seismic vessel, and then after that, my first trips were on vessels that were former fishing trawlers. Now, I can tell you, this vessel here, the Seabourn Venture, is infinitely more comfortable than traveling on a fishing trawler to Antarctica for a variety of reasons. But Seabourn looked at the expedition space and said, okay, we know our product. We're super luxury, we're ultra luxury, we have a great brand following. How do we embrace the expedition space? Because expedition tends to conjure in people's minds, oh, this is going to be rugged, I'm going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be cold, or it's going to be hot, or it's going to be wet, or it's going to be too dry, it's not going to be very good food. And all that was kind of true when I first started out, but as Seabourn looked at the industry, they started about 10 years ago with a soft expedition product, which they call Ventures by Seabourn. And we did that on the traditional fleet around the world. Not everywhere, but places like Alaska, Norway, and even Antarctica. And we were doing just a few trips a year to see what the audience thought of it and see how our ships behaved of it, how the officers responded to it and the crew. Kind of, if you will, sort of a soft test. And during that time, we were also drawing plans for these magnificent vessels. So we have the 2 newest expedition ships in the industry. Our fleet only consists of 2 expedition vessels, the Pursuit and the Venture. Pursuit launched in 22, in the summer of 22, almost to this month. It was actually launched in May, so early part of summer. And then Pursuit was launched in 23. So they're very new. They're identical in every way except the artwork on board. Everything else is the same, so if you go to one ship or the other, you're getting the same experience. So what makes up an expedition ship? Well, first and foremost, the expedition ship, since we're going to concentrate on polar regions, we wanted a vessel that had a PC-6 class hull. That is the strongest hull. I know that doesn't mean much to everybody here, but that is the strongest hull design you can get outside of a Coast Guard icebreaker. And it even means we can crush into ice that's 1 meter and 1.5 meters thick, so first-year sea ice. Icebreakers can go into multi-year sea ice, which can sometimes be 3 meters thick. But we wanted that capability because we wanted to be able to push into the ice to get into some of these remote fjords along the way. We wanted to be able to push into brash ice to get closer to feeding whales or orcas or polar bears. And so that was the first thing we wanted. But then you need to have a platform. Most cruise ships are designed around tenders. We use something called the Zodiac, which I'll talk more about later. So that means you need to be lower to the waterline where you have your doors, your egresses. So we designed that. We wanted submarines, which is totally new to the expedition space. So you had to have a garage for those or a moon door. There's 2 different strategies for that. We go to places where you really want to be out on deck. Patrick was alluding to that with some of his imagery and his personal accounts of it. You heard it there in the testimonials. You wanted to be able to see out all the time. So every suite has a veranda. There are no interior spaces. There are no suites that don't have their own balcony, private veranda. But in addition to that, we have 30,000 square feet of deck space. Our expedition team is out there patrolling those decks almost continuously because it's their passion. But it also means you always have somebody to converse with, like, oh, what is that strange bird over there? There's probably someone within earshot of you that would be more than happy to pontificate about everything you wanted to know about that bird, and probably a lot more that you didn't want to know. Or the whales, or the icebergs, or the glaciers. The ships are designed to be small on purpose. You know, it's not the greatest economic platform for Seabourn as a whole, but an expedition product, we feel like, in my experience, it works best with smaller numbers because you want to be able to take advantage of the wildlife opportunities as they happen. And if you have too many people, that means you can't do that all at once. And so that's why they're smaller numbers, 132 suites, 264 guests total. So it is a more yacht-like experience on board as well. So what does it look like on the interior spaces? So this is the Discovery Center in our top left. This is what you would consider like a lecture hall. This is where we held all of our presentations on board. We hold our daily recap and briefing, and a recap is exactly what it sounds like. That end of the day, that will make an announcement right before cocktail hour. People can come down to the Discovery Center, or you can watch in your suite as well. And the expedition leader and the expedition team will be there, and they'll pick out 2 to 3 topics that we think are germane to that day that really need to be expanded upon. It might be unique feeding behavior from a humpback whale, or it might be the plumage on a certain type of penguin. Why is it molting and looking like that? Or it could be something else entirely. It might be historical significance to this day in polar exploration. But they'll talk about that there, and the expedition leader gives you a briefing on the day to come. Now the briefing is pretty interesting in relation to normal cruising, because normal cruising, you look at your brochure, you're going to be in Barcelona at 7 a.m., you're going to leave Barcelona at 2 p.m., and you're going to be at Piraeus 3 days later, and you know the schedule. Expedition travel is very different in that respect, and especially in a place like Antarctica, where it's more fluid and dynamic. We don't want to lock ourselves into going to this bay at this time, when along the way we pass a group of orca that are hunting seals in the pack ice. Why would you drive past that just because you had a schedule to go into this other bay? So the expedition leader and the captains look at the weather, they look at the other reports from other vessels in the area, they look at telemetry records from animals that have been tagged in the area that are under scientific study, and they adjust the schedule each day. The great thing about that is that gives us a lot of dynamic flexibility. The bad thing about that is they can adjust the schedule all they want. I've done it a number of times. Plan A when I go to bed. Plan B when I get a call from the bridge at 2 a.m. because they saw something. Plan C when I get another call at 4 a.m. Plan D when I get up for breakfast. And by the time the guests actually start waking up, we might be on plan Foxtrot or golf or somewhere on down the alphabet. But the point is we're always looking to maximize the day's experiences. And that's why that Discovery Center is so important. It lets everybody get in there and kind of get an idea what the expedition leader is thinking about for the next day ahead. We've got the pool deck. It is a heated pool in the Antarctic. 2 jacuzzis out there as well. It's the infinity style, so look at that view. You're sitting in the pool, warm and toasty, and you're looking at, you know, a 3 million ton piece of ice back there, which is kind of mind-boggling if you think about it. World-class dining. There are multiple dining menus on the vessels, and I'll talk more about that. The Seabourn product is almost entirely inclusive. There are a few things that you can add on, but your dining experiences are not one of them. All the restaurants are open. There's 24-hour room service. We have sushi that is fresh made every day by chefs in the club. So it's really kind of, you can pick your own culinary adventure each day without ever having to deal with chits and sign-ups and all that sort of thing. We have a phenomenal spa and wellness team on board, multiple massage theaters. We have it's attached to our gym, a full-service gym, plus a motion studio for yoga, Pilates, and Zumba, and the like. This upper left image is our main dining room, the restaurant, and it's the one that's slightly more formal. On the expedition ships, we don't have formal nights like we do on the Seabourn Ocean Fleet because it's an expedition, because people are packing extra gear like camera equipment and hiking gear and that sort of stuff. So we wanted to simplify things a little bit, but it will be a little bit more formal, maybe business casual or the Texas tuxedo that I'm in today. But that's the one main restaurant. We also have the Colonnade restaurant, which I'll show you an image of in a moment. The spa there on our top right, that is a section of the spa. It's one of our 2 saunas with those big, huge picture windows. So even when you're toasty in the sauna, you still get to keep an eye on the wildlife and the icebergs outside. Some of the beautiful artwork that I mentioned before, all custom for these vessels. We do have some elements that are traditional to all the Seabourn vessels. The atrium shown here with the geode interpretation there at the bottom of the stairwell, Seabourn Square. We also have the Expedition Lounge there, which is that space on the bottom on the right-hand side where that fireplace is. We have 2 of those in there. And that's adjacent to the theater, so actually just behind the theater in the bottom left. And that space is, think of it like a ski lodge. It's got a full service bar, it's got a barista, it's got these cozy chairs in there and the fireplace, and it's oftentimes a place where people hang out before or after recap, or before their excursion for the day. We also hold something called fireside chats in there with our expedition team, which tend to be sort of an informal thing, almost kind of like this, where we're not giving an educational sermon, but we're giving something that might be more anecdotal. Usually staff members' misadventures, if I'm being honest, like the things that they did wrong before they got this job. You know, like, oh, I was in the jungle one time and I forgot to take a tent, and then I was sleeping and I fell off out of the hammock and there was a python, those kind of stories. Very entertaining, but the kind of thing you probably didn't envision when you took your expedition. So those dining venues. The restaurant, you saw that image before, that's the main one. Then we have the Colonnade, and that's 1 deck above the main restaurant, and is a more informal. In the breakfast and lunch, it's going to be buffet style typically, and then in the evenings we'll have a rotating menu. It could be a menu that comes from all over the different world's cuisines. It might be Indian market one night. It might be, they try Tex-Mex, but you can't do Tex-Mex outside of Texas, but they give it a shot. And the guacamole needs some pointers, but I've been working on that. But they have Italian night, they have British fare night, and so on. The pantry and the bow lounge. The bow lounge, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now, because the pantry is great. It has little light snacks, self-service coffee and espresso, sodas, soup of the day, that sort of thing. So you can grab a snack up there. You'll never guess where it is. It's in the bow of the ship, as you'd expect. And it goes right out in that massive public-only bow space. When you see the image of the vessel, you'll see that huge, beautiful bow teak deck. That's because the mooring deck is actually underneath it. So there's no working equipment out there. It's unique to the Seabourn vessels. We kept that because we knew this would be a place people would gravitate towards. And we didn't want their view blocked by mooring winches and ropes and that sort of stuff. The computer has a mind of its own here. The other thing, you look at the instruments that are up there in the top right. Those instruments are fed directly on cables from the bridge itself. So it's your sonar, it's your radar, it's your cartography programs. It's everything the bridge is looking at to make their decisions. So if you're not on the bridge, you can be down there, and usually there'll be a junior officer or one of the expedition team, and you know, why are we turning starboard when it looks like it's better to go to port on the map? And they explain what the bridge is seeing, why they're choosing those directions, what the weather ahead of us is doing, and so on. You have the Seabourn Square, which is synonymous with Seabourn. That's kind of the hub of the ship where guest services are located, puzzles and games. It's a leisurely spot. We have the fresh roasted coffee up there 24 hours a day, plus the gelato station, which even in Antarctica is incredibly popular, as you can imagine, homemade gelato. The Constellation Lounge, and sushi in the club. So all these dining venues are available to you, plus 24-hour-a-day room service, free of charge. So what do the suites look like? Okay, so you're going to feed us. Where are we sleeping every night? This is my favorite suite on board because it's unique. The panorama suites, we have a few of them on each ship, and it gets its name from those panoramic windows there that you have, those floor-to-ceiling windows, and it bumps out from the hull of the ship. So instead of it being flat hull, think of this big arch that comes out of the panoramic suites. And so they step out there, so when you're sitting in that sofa, you're looking actually ahead of the ship. And you can also sit in the chair and look astern of the ship, uninterrupted views. They're also the only suites we have that do not have carpet. They have tile in there that's radiant heated tile. So when you get up in the morning or in the middle of the night, you step off there, it's nice and toasty. And the soaking tub in these rooms, I think, are the best ones on the ship. They're situated out near those windows as well. And it's like one of those tubs you see in Koh Samui at one of the Four Seasons resorts or something like that. It's this enormous tub that you can probably fit 4 people in, but it's pretty luxurious when it's just yourself. Our winter garden suite are the upper images there. It's a 2-story suite. So those windows go from the bedroom all the way down to where that curved sofa is down below. So that is our largest and grandest suite on board. We have our signature suites, which are also multi-room suites there in the lower left. It just really wanted to take off on me. So the bedroom behind you, and then the sitting room, small kitchen and dining area, walk-in closets. But all of those are the upper tier suites. Our most common suite is the veranda suite there, and that's the room I'm going into in just 7 days' time, I think, as I join the ship in Greenland. And that has the king-size bed as pictured, but it can be separated into two single beds. It's got the sitting area separated by the full wall of curtains, and then the veranda out there. Each suite has a full bathroom with tub and shower separate, and 2 vanities with your own station. So one person can be shaving, one person can be tidying up their glamour for the evening ahead. But they're amazingly comfortable suites. They have all of them have access to the Starlink Wi-Fi service, which increased the speeds and the connectivity in the expedition industry not even tenfold. It's more like 100-fold from the internet that I had when I first started working, which was non-existent. We still had radio officers then. That's aging myself a little bit, but it's true. And then on top of that, one of the things I think is most unique about our ships is that I've never seen anywhere else. They have the walk-in closets, but they have, in addition to that, a separate wardrobe that is a heated wardrobe. So when you're in the tropics, you can put your swimsuit in there and it dries out between lunch and the afternoon outing. In the polar regions, you can put your socks, your jacket, your parka, everything in there, and it's nice and toasty when you're ready to go out on deck or ashore. Pretty remarkable intuitive thinking. And that's sort of the Seabourn ethos, is to always be looking slightly ahead of the expectation. Now, we talked about the ship, we talked about the interiors, but I also hinted that the expedition product as a whole is a different product than traditional cruising. I talked about that dynamic nature of it. The other element that makes it different are these people right here. And these are some of the greatest colleagues I've ever had in my entire professional career. This is the expedition team. And there are 23 members on each sailing, and they are a series of experts from ornithology to glaciology to historians to botanists to oceanographers and so on, world-class kayak guides and submarine pilots. And they are with you every step of the way. When you go to, say, Barcelona for the day and learn about the Sagrada Familia, you're learning everything that person can give you that day. But they go home, and you get on the ship, and the gangway comes up, and you're on your way to the next destination. So if you had a follow-up question or wanted to learn a bit more, that conversation stopped at the gangway. This group is with you from start to finish. And so many of our team end up becoming Facebook friends or social media friends with our guests and vice versa, because you have this super strong bond of these shared experiences throughout the voyage. That expertise is with you out on the hikes, out on the nature walks, in the Zodiacs, at cocktail hour, at recap, at dinner, and breakfast and lunch. They are remarkable, remarkable people, but they're also, I think, the most rewarding part and component of the expedition experience. And here's a little bit more about that unique team.
Expedition cruising is a way to connect guests with destination. It's getting them out into that destination and then giving them a taste of everything that it can offer. Wildlife, scenery, culture, history, all of that.
There is a world-class team of 24 expedition staff on board. They are key to the entire experience. The expedition team comprises of an expedition leader, We then have general naturalists, we have Zodiac drivers, we have kayaking guides, we have submarine pilots.
You also find people who are university professors.
I always describe the expedition team as having a set of encyclopedias walking around with you because again, it doesn't stop on the ship. When you're on the shore side, they're with you all the time.
When expedition team members join Seabourn, they already come to us with a wealth of knowledge and background in the destinations that we visit. But one of the things that we help foster when they're with us is the safety element of things. We have Zodiac safety training, and our team members participate in that.
We send staff every year on kayak training.
We have firearm and polar bear safety training for our expeditions into the high Arctic.
We go to areas where there could be crevasses. And so every year we train 6 to 8 to 10 people and we send them to Iceland for crevasse rescue training. And then of course the big one for us too is the submarine operation.
The pilots have a tremendous amount of training so that we can have a very safe operation every time we take guests down into the water.
Safety without a doubt guides every single decision we make.
It's clear that this is a really professional operation and that people here are so passionate about getting this right. We want to connect guests with the destination, especially if we recognize it may be the only time they visit. And we do that through the passion and the knowledge of our expedition team members.
Well said, Robin and Jen, two of my favorite colleagues. So it has changed. Robin said 24, so when they recorded this we had 24. It has dropped down to 23 because we realized after a couple of years of running the ships, we needed that one other person being more utilitarian with the crew responsibility. So we swapped that out, but it's 23-person expedition team. As I said, it's a group of academics, scientists. Some of the people are taking a break from the research and they're joining you because working off grants is frankly a lot of hard work. It's hard and sort of like chaotic and variable. So this gives them steady income so they can continue their research. Other former or current professors who might be on a break from university. And others are professional guides at the places we go as well. We've got their international team. There are a lot from North America, but there are just as many from South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and the South Pacific, Polynesian area. The other thing we like to do within our teams, especially in some areas where it's possible, the high Arctic is one of those, Greenland, and also the Kimberley region, we like to bring in local guides to complement the team as well, so you're getting their expertise. Two of my favorite guides that I worked with are Lau and Adrian from the Wanabal Gambra people. You saw some of the ceremony there from our naming ceremony for the pursuit last year, but they are Aboriginal guides from Northwest Australia, and hearing their interpretation of the land that they have such a close connection to, and their history, their oral family history, which is the Aboriginal way, hearing that at recap, it left the whole room speechless, and there was no need for anyone else to speak because it's so heartwarming, but it's also so earnest and true to their culture. When you're looking at our voyages on the website or in the brochures, oftentimes you're going to see this kind of iconography on the left-hand side, and that denotes what you can expect on that particular voyage. The included Zodiac cruises and landings, and that's an important thing. When you go on a normal voyage, a cruise, you're going to expect to pay extra for your shore excursions. At every stop we make on the expedition ships, there is at least one included experience, and usually it's the premier experience for what we feel that area represents. In a place like Antarctica, virtually everything is included because there's no infrastructure locally to give you third-party tours. The Penguins haven't figured out the PayPal system yet. Once they get that, that might change that dynamic a little bit. But that's the Zodiac up there. The Zodiac, you've seen them in the videos here. The Zodiac, think of an expedition into Antarctica as a safari at sea. The safari concept is pretty familiar to everyone. You go to these beautiful lodges, they take great care of you, they make sure no lions come into your tent at night or into your chalet. And in the morning you get up and everything's dictated by the rhythm of the wildlife, right? You get up early, you get a nice hearty breakfast, you get out there, and the guides have been working during the night to learn where the leopards are, where the lions are, where the Cape buffalo might be, and so on. And so you go out in the Range Rovers, the Land Rovers, and you look for that wildlife. The Zodiacs are our Land Rovers of the ocean. And there's no vehicle that I have more confidence in than a Zodiac. They were originally designed in part by Jacques Cousteau with the French Navy. And if you look at amphibious marine teams or amphibious military teams around the globe, Everyone that's worth their salt are using Zodiacs. They are the best boats. They can land on almost any surface: ice, rocks, surf, coral, sand, everything. I've lived in a Zodiac for 2 years or 2 summers in the Arctic with one other person. It was our platform working with walrus, platform working with polar bears and beluga whales. I trust it implicitly. The next icon is the guided walks and hikes, evident by the boot there. Kayaking excursions. There'll be some trips where we don't have kayaking. The Kimberley is one of those because there are a lot of saltwater crocodiles. We feel like those two don't mix too well. Submarine dives. There'll be some voyages that don't offer submarine dives. Sometimes that's due to visibility in a place that might have a lot of freshwater runoff and you just don't get, might not even be able to see to that chair underwater. Other places it may be that the local administration, they might have military activity in the area and they just don't want the subs in the water. But we try to offer those as much as we can. The complimentary signature events is that next icon. Things like the polar plunge or caviar on the ice. Our fireside chats, which I mentioned, the daily presentations that I talked about. But of course, most people are drawn to expedition travel because of the natural history, the wildlife in particular, and sometimes the scenery. And so you'll see, when you see that icon, it'll list which wildlife is to be expected there. In the Antarctic, penguins, of course, the tuxedo friends, seals, whales, seabird life, and so on. That seal on there.
The sun's probably going to be the greatest exploration journey that the ship has on board.
It's a way to actually encounter the environment and feel like you're right in the water with it.
The sphere has the same refractive index as water, so the second you go underwater, that sphere disappears.
It just blows people's minds.
Bridge 7712, we are away.
The operation is incredibly safe.
These are state-of-the-art submarines.
They're rated to about 1,000 feet, 300 meters, and then there's a support boat that stays on the surface.
Many of these dive sites are totally unexplored, so our guests go down and see something that no one ever has seen.
We want people to come back from their experience feeling magic from it.
We're taking the subs and we're exploring the world's oceans with them.
The magic Jen speaks of there, I was wary of the complexity of bringing submarines into the expedition space. It's relatively new. There's only 3 operators that are using any type of submersible. I worked in Antarctica for years where I was one of 2 divers. And I would dive down with a video camera and photographer set to bring imagery back to the surface. And I believe wholeheartedly in the importance of that because the ecosystem down there depends on everything below the surface. Everything that's happening below feeds everything above. The krill being the baseline unit or prey species down there, but there's so much else going on. And while I was diving, people were always fascinated by the diving, and they were interested in what I brought up to the surface. Very few people volunteered to dive with me. Partly because it looks like you're in a spacesuit because of all the equipment you have to have, and partly because of the 28.5 degree Fahrenheit water that no one seemed terribly interested in spending an hour in. The submarines change all of that. That dome that Robin spoke about, it is milled so perfectly that when it does submerge, it is neutral with the water around it. And Jen didn't, and in the clip that was cut out of that, we talk about the number of times, the number of hours our team spends cleaning the inside of that dome because people cannot believe where the water stops. And you'll see them stick their hand, oh, it's right there. And then they do it again, oh, it's right there. Because they can't tell where the plexiglass, the acrylic stops and the sea begins. And this is one of those things that's not inclusive. We couldn't possibly get through 264 people on a dive in a single day. So this is one of the things that is an additional cost. But when you can afford it, and when you have that interest, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is a phenomenal way to get greater understanding of the places we're visiting. Another element in play, you heard Patrick talk about it, the polar plunge. Why are we tethered? Yes, the insurers forced us to tether people to it. It's not necessary because believe me, the people get back out of the water faster than you ever thought humanly possible. Physiologically, having been a marine biologist, we are not designed to porpoise like a dolphin or a penguin, but I've seen it happen. People hit that water and it's almost like they've been dipped in flour because they come back out and not even wet. They're out there so fast. They're incredibly adept at getting back on the ship where we have a warm robe and hot chocolate and maybe that sauna upstairs waiting for you. So let's get into Antarctica as a destination. So when you go down to Antarctica on our ships, more than likely you're going to start in Buenos Aires. There are some other variants to that. I'm going to talk about those a little bit later, but you're going to start in Buenos Aires. You're going to internationally fly into Buenos Aires, Argentina. You'll overnight, and the next day you'll hop on one of our 2 charter flights that will take you down to Ushuaia, which is at the very tip of Argentina, the very tip of Tierra del Fuego. It's the southernmost large city in the world. There's another Chilean city or town that's across the bay, but this is the bigger city. And that's where the ships will be waiting for you. You hop on board, and away you go. Now, we have lots of briefings, talk about Antarctica and safety on board and all that sort of stuff. But you want to be out on deck for the Beagle Channel as we sail out of Ushuaia. Ushuaia is nestled into the southern Alps, and it's a very picturesque setting. And then you go through the Beagle Channel, these narrow passageways with the Tierra del Fuego mountains on either side, and you'll get your first wildlife there. Right out of Ushuaia, you start seeing your first penguins, the Magellanic penguins, which live on the southern part of South America, South American sea lions, albatross, petrels, shearwaters, dolphins, and whales. So being out on deck and sailing out of the Beagle Channel is part of the experience. And then we get into the Drake Passage. Now, I mentioned the Drake Passage earlier. Everyone's like, oh, how bad is this going to be? Well, sometimes it can be bad. My wife and I worked in Antarctica for 10 years together. She loved her job, hates seasickness, gets seasick nearly every time, and she said she wouldn't have traded it for anything. But the thing is that while the Drake Passage has that infamy that I talked about from the Flying P line and the cargo days, we're not actually doing the Drake Passage. We're crossing that body of water, but we're not sailing around the Horn. We're bisecting it. And when I first started doing it, it would take our ships 3 to 4 days. Now it takes us 36 hours. The ships were designed with the hull design that has improved the hydrodynamics, the stabilizers on board, and the speed make this trip go pretty quickly. And I know on Patrick's trip, he talked about waiting 8 hours to go across. What happens sometimes is we built in flexibility into the timings so that if there is a bad system in the Drake, we can wait that out or we can jump ahead of it. And so that when you look at Ushuaia and you think, why aren't there tours being offered in Ushuaia? It's because we want to keep that flexibility in play, and if people are off on tour, we can't leave earlier than we'd like, and vice versa. We watch for that, but I would say on average throughout the season, it's about every 5th crossing might be a little bumpier. The average is going to be about 4 meters of swell, 14 feet, and about 35 knots of wind. Our ships can ride that super calmly. Only if you're hypersensitive might you feel that, and then really only if you're in an upper deck or a forward deck suite. The rest of the time, it might escalate, and we advise accordingly on that. Again, if you're really susceptible, just book one of the suites that are in the mid part of the ship and the lower decks, and you'll be fine. But the Drake Passage is not just the lore of the Drake Passage. It's also more wildlife. The beautiful Pintado petrel, it looks like a Jackson Pollock painting there. They start following us across the Drake Passage because they're riding that pressure wave of the ship. They're riding the winds. Huge albatross, the wandering albatross, the largest flying bird on the earth. And then we get into the convergence zone, which is the band of current that circumnavigates the globe at that latitude and is really the biologic foundation for what Antarctica is. It's the thing that separates it from the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. It insulates it. Think of it as an air conditioning belt going around the Antarctic continent because it's uninterrupted by landing, so it just gets colder and stronger and colder and stronger. And you can see it sometimes because they're usually where that transition happens. There'll be a band of fog, and then you'll get into the super dry air of the Antarctic. And then you know you're on your way. Now when you get down there, the Weddell seal on our left, I think, is one of the more photogenic animals in all of the world, but certainly Antarctica. These guys are some of the deepest diving seals. They can go down to over 1 kilometer of depth and stay down there for almost 2 hours. They love Antarctic cod or Chilean sea bass, so they will compete with you for that fish at the buffet line, but they only eat one a day and then they tend to sleep the rest of the time. The Zodiac's out on these Zodiac cruises, where here you see they're next to this monolith of ice with a beautiful arch in it. The ice down there, when I first started going down there, it was these shots, the wildlife, particularly seals, since that's my passion, and I would take more and more photos of that. And now when I look through the years, I get less and less wildlife and a lot more ice, because the ice is ever changing. It's like you're sailing through a Dr. Seuss sculpture garden, because they're so whimsical. If you think cloud watching is fascinating, wait till you see some of the icebergs down there. You sail those 600 miles across the Drake Passage, down to the South Shetlands or the peninsula, and you start off in earnest all those Antarctic experience days. The Image Masters program is something I haven't spoken about yet, but it's relatively new. We started that last summer on both vessels in the polar regions, and now we've expanded to most of our expedition destinations. And that's for those people that have a real passion for photography. It's another add-on option you can do, where 10 guests, only 10, will join our expedition photographer, and they'll get some insight into their equipment, whether it's iPhones and Androids, all the way up to DSLRs, in the studio, the photo studio on the ship. But they'll also get extra time with that photographer out on shore and in the Zodiac. So where some of the guests might be out for 90 minutes on the excursion, that team might be out for 3 hours on the excursion. So that extra time and the extra space, because the crowds won't be in the way, it allows the photographers to really focus in on those moments that they're going to relive with all their friends and family later. When you're down on the peninsula, you look at the jagged mountains that line the spine of the peninsula. Think of the peninsula as an extension of the Andes, because that's what it is, really. The Transantarctic Mountains are a portion of the Andes, and which goes all the way up to the Rockies and North America. That line of mountains was unbroken until this small plate called the Scotia Arc, or Scotia Plate, pushed through there and separated them. So you got beautiful alpine topography with these cascading glaciers in all directions. But then you also have the icebergs, both sea ice and glacial icebergs. The penguins, of course. Gentoos, adelies, and chin straps are the most common. But we sometimes in the early season can see emperor penguins. You get kayaking, and you're under your own power out there. And it's a place where, even though it's been incredibly popular over the last 2 decades, it's still a destination that so few on Earth have seen. And I think it's the one spot on the planet where I wish I could take every classroom to see, because the understanding and the awe that people feel about the wilderness that is Antarctica when they get there is a life-changing aspect. And if more people could see it, I think when they're younger, they have a greater understanding of the value of protecting the Earth and the wildlife in it in their later years. But as much as I love Antarctica, the ultimate Antarctic experience to me is the longer trip that goes not only to the peninsula, but also the Falklands and this place. This is South Georgia Island. And when I first started going there, my grandmother kept wondering what I was doing in Savannah every year. And that's not where I was going, because I bring back these photos of the penguins. She's like, where is that? And no, it's not. Totally different conversation. But South Georgia is a small island. It's 1,200 miles east of Tierra del Fuego. And it sits in the middle of the Atlantic at the very edge of that Scotia Plate that I was talking about. So it's got these beautiful Swiss Alp-style mountains in the background, but it has the most prolific and dense wildlife of anywhere on Earth. And I'm talking Serengeti, I'm talking the Yukon, I'm talking the Galapagos, I'm talking Alaska. And not only is the wildlife dense there, they are completely unafraid. I can land on the beach there, and all of you will be king penguins, 3 feet tall and 45 pounds each, and you start walking up to me immediately because you're like, that is the oddest looking penguin I've ever seen. And they come over and they start grabbing your jacket strings and your bootstraps and everything else. The seals, especially the first little pups, they're chasing around behind you. They're like, oh, this is something I can play with. This is something I can chase. They're completely unencumbered by the human presence there. And some of those landings, these are all king penguins. And this, if you pan out of that, there'll be 500,000 king penguins on that beach. Some beaches will have 100,000 fur seals or 10,000 southern elephant seals, which is the largest seal on Earth. And when I talk about largest seal on Earth, I know you're having a hard time picturing what that is. Think of a seal that is as big as your Yukon or Denali. It's 6 meters long, so 18, 19 feet, and can weigh almost 8,000 pounds. So it's a tax break if you could drive it around Texas. They're not real steerable. You also have the history of South Georgia, the whaling stations there that were in the bygone era, and of course the story of Ernest Shackleton centers around South Georgia quite a bit. Here is another quick video so you don't have to listen to me all the time.
We were near Stonington Island.
And this is a kayaking experience.
We saw this whale blowing. It was so quiet, I could hear the guest's heartbeat. The whale decided to follow us, and it even almost touched the bow of my kayak. The reaction of every guest, they start breathing again. They stop breathing for a couple of minutes. You could hear not the blow of the whale, but the blow of the guests. It was a once-in-a-lifetime encounter.
Santiago says he could hear the guest's heartbeats. I think that was an exaggeration. I think that was his heartbeat that was beating that back as the minke whales showed up. But it's one of those things you don't know what's going to happen. And you're looking at the kayaks and you're like, I'm not kayaking in Antarctica. What are you talking? I've had 91-year-old retired school teachers from Beaumont, Texas go down there and kayak for the first time in their life, and they were blown away. It is incredibly safe. You've got 3 kayak guides with you. We dress you in these dry suits. You're totally protected. They're very safe. We're not taking you out in whitewater kayaking. It's flat, calm, because we want it to be calm. We want you to be out there to be able to hear all those sounds that Santi was just describing. We want to hear the puff of the seal as it comes up, takes a breath, and figures out, what is that super slow-moving creature on the surface right there? Or the penguins that will zip by hurriedly, or sometimes even something as magical as a minke whale coming up to take interest in the kayaks moving across the water. So what else is on that South Georgia trip? I've talked about South Georgia, and then these 2 images are from the Falkland Islands. Now, a lot of people will think of the Falkland Islands and they'll somewhere in the memory banks like, wasn't there a conflict, Margaret Thatcher, 1982, something like that. We do cover a little bit of the war history there, especially on the eastern side of the archipelago in Stanley, the main township. But the main reason we go to the Falklands is actually to get to the western part of the archipelago. It has over 100 plus islands in the Falkland group, and some of those are some of the wildest islands you can imagine. 100,000 pair of these black-browed albatross, which their wings would spread this whole front row here. Now that's about as wide as the albatross's wingspan. 100,000 pair of those raising their chicks for the summer, and the rockhopper penguins with their unruly plumage up top there are pretty comical as well. They got these bright red eyes, which this image doesn't capture. It always looks like they had too much time on Bourbon or 6th Street the night before, but they're amazingly adapted creatures for that area. And here we talked about, there's also a number of other species of penguin there. The king penguins, gentoos, and the Magellanic penguins and macaronis are there as well. You'll learn about the war, you'll see Stanley, but you'll also go out and camp to some of these remote farmhouses, these stations where they've been raising sheep out there for almost 200 years. And these family farms are that old. But most people, they're not my favorite animal. They're a little stinkier than people imagine when they conjure up the image of a penguin. But everybody loves these little tuxedoed friends. These are the Adelie penguins, and they're the cleanest looking of all the penguins because they got that all white face and the little black top hat and the black back. There was one naturalist that said there are only 2 types of penguins. The ones coming towards you, the white ones, and the ones walking away from you, the black ones. And that was clearly describing the Adelie penguins there. One of the most numerous and the southernmost breeding of all the penguins. They actually breed even further south than the emperor penguins do.
I always liked the notion of going on an expedition. When the opportunity to join Seabourn Venture came up, we said, yes, we're doing it. And I can tell you it just has not disappointed.
Expedition cruising with Seabourn, it's just an amazing experience.
At any point, you can look out the window of your room and see something spectacular.
So we love the penguins. We love the
Nobody says they love the seals.
feeling
I don't
of being
understand.
part of a
Penguins come up a lot.
village.
The ship is just stunning.
The suites are amazing. I can't talk enough about how amazing the suites are.
The camaraderie that we develop with the crew, they're all so friendly, always smiling.
It just makes you feel like they're family.
We heard this cracking sound. All of a sudden, this amazing
a little bit more.
Everyone talks about 5-star service. This is 7 stars, 24/7.
Knowing that you've got such experienced personnel, you enjoy the experience because you're comfortable in knowing that everything's taken care of, everything is secure, and you can be relaxed.
It really brings together a vast group of people who are all adventurers.
I think it's a perfect balance of luxury meets exhilaration.
That to me is the difference. And that's what we've always been Seabourners.
Those expedition moments they spoke about there, that is the goal each day. It's the goal when you're out on the hikes, when you're out in the kayaks with the expedition team, but it's also the goal of our teams on board, the service staff, the hotel team. They want to find those moments that really mean something to you, because you go on this vacation, you may not want to go out every day. It's really a choose your own adventure type of experience. You can be as active or inactive as you like. It is your holiday after all. The accoutrements on board are phenomenal, but sometimes you just want to enjoy things on board. And the hotel team will be finding unique ways to spoil you on board, even if you choose to stay behind and not go out on the day. Some of those things, those signature events, I mentioned the polar plunge, the fireside chat, and our caviar on ice experience, which is a play on our caviar in the surf that we do on the ocean vessels, and the other Seabourn moments along the way. Maybe, and everyone's going to have something different, as I said. For some people, it's seeing their first penguins walk up to them. For others, it's that iceberg. For others, it might be snorkeling with manta rays in the South Pacific, or giant whale sharks. For others, it's seeing a rare bird that they've been looking for on their life list for their entire lives. And sometimes it's just being out there with their families to experience this together in these unique remote destinations that separate us from the hustle and bustle of day-to-day life. These are just some images, some of those moments along the way. Here's the ship pushing into some pack ice, which again harkens to that PC6 classification. And one of the moments captured here.
I think what makes our Seabourn signature event so special is you're in this incredible destination. You're already blown away by what you've seen, and we're just adding like the icing on the cake, really.
Caviar on ice is a signature Seabourn experience, and when we're in the polar regions, we bring caviar and champagne out on deck and serve it to guests so everyone can have this ultra-luxury experience in this beautiful remote location.
The hotel staff are obviously delivering that experience, and the expedition team is there as well. Like with any event on board the ship, the expedition team is there to engage with the guests, talk about guests, because again, although we have a camera on ice, you never know what we're going to see.
So the audio there was overlooking
It's just
itself.
a way of enhancing
But
the
what this is
experience.
that often it takes place on the bow. Like this is that big bow that I was
It's a
speaking about.
fantastic thing to do.
They'll bring out this big bar for the caviar. We'll bring in glacial ice from the day's excursion, line the bar with that, champagne, caviar, hot chocolate, gluten-vine. And we're out there, the hotel team celebrating with you. Sometimes we'll have one of the entertainers singing or playing a guitar or accompaniment, and then you see everybody drops focus on the caviar, because now there's a whale that shows up and starts feeding on the side of the ship on the horizon there. So it's an amazing, amazing moment, and just one of many all over the world with these expedition vessels. So we'll get into some maps and details of where the itineraries actually happen, so you can visualize it a little bit better. This is the classic Antarctic Great White Continent experience. Starts as early as November and ends in March every year. Our season has expanded a little bit with the industry, partly because of change in climate down there. But this is the one that you can kind of squeeze in if you have the least amount of time. This is the one that I mentioned. You'll fly into Buenos Aires, then down to the Ushuaia on the charter flights, and straight down to the peninsula. It's an amazing trip, but you can expand that a little bit and go out for 13 days, which gives you a little bit more time to explore. The reason you'd want to explore a bit more is it allows us to get a little further south, say below the Antarctic Circle down here, or over into the Weddell Sea, which offers a different perspective. The peninsula on the west side is like the Florida of Antarctica, and I say that meaning that its weather patterns are much warmer than everywhere else. It's a milder climate, but on the east side of that peninsula, in the dry side, is the Weddell Sea, and that is more like the rest of the continent. And one of my favorite reasons for going over there is that in the Weddell Sea you get the big tabular icebergs. The tabular icebergs are the ones that you read about or see on the news sometimes when they describe an iceberg the size of a state. They come from that area. And literally it happens. We had one last year that drifted off the Weddell Sea and out towards South Georgia that was 146 miles long and 37 miles wide. And that's not the biggest I've seen down there. You'd sail along this iceberg that is 7 stories high above the water and 14 to 20 stories high below the water. And you're completely dumbfounded. This thing is moving around the open ocean. And they create their own microclimates because they're melting from underneath. That fresh water brings krill species to the surface where more animals can reach it. And they're pretty fascinating to see. That ultimate Antarctic experience, I already talked about that. Sometimes it'll go clockwise like this, and other times it'll go counterclockwise. We tend to do the Falklands first at the beginning of the season, and we tend to do Antarctica first toward the end of the austral summer. So in our spring, you might go to the peninsula first. In our fall, you might go to the Falklands first. We're watching the weather patterns, we're watching the wildlife as well. We also have the one that Patrick did is one that starts on the west side of South America. Instead of Buenos Aires, it starts in San Antonio, or possibly ends in San Antonio, because we have a version of this that goes at the end of the season as well. And it will go to Ushuaia, but first it's going along all the glaciers and the lake district of southern Chile, Tierra del Fuego, and then down to the peninsula and up to Ushuaia. At the end of the season, it'll start in Ushuaia and end in Santiago or San Antonio, Chile. Now, quickly, we'll move on to some other parts of the globe. We've got the Arctic and Northwest Passage. The Arctic and Northwest Passage trips, they happen at this time of year, in our boreal summer, so out of the summer we're used to. This is an image of Ilulissat in Greenland, where they have these massive fjord of continuous glacial icebergs calving off the Greenland ice cap. I'm actually going up to Ilulissat next week to join the ship, the Venture, for the start of the Northwest Passage. So this is about the time of year you'd expect that. Before we get into the Northwest Passage and then kick off our Arctic season each year, typically we will be in Iceland. And this is one that includes the west coast of Iceland. So you fly in and out of Reykjavik. You do some stops on the west coast, which is really kind of wild and rugged coastline with lots of seabirds and puffins. And then it goes up into the largest fjord system in the world, Scoresbysund, near Torment. And that area is known for glaciers, 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 and icebergs galore, and also some good polar bear opportunities in there. You've got another voyage that includes the Scottish Isles, Iceland, and Scoresbysund. And this is a longer voyage from Dublin to Reykjavik. And a lot of people are kind of trying to figure out why we would have an expedition trip in the British Isles. The British Isles, when you conjure up images of the UK, you're thinking London, or maybe Stonehenge, or maybe the whiskey tastings in Scotland. But the outer isles on the west coast out there, places like Skellig Michael, Fair Isle, Musa, Staffa in Scotland, these are incredibly hard to get to on your own. And using the ship as a platform, you're getting to see all of them. There's a lot of great Bronze and Iron Age history there. Villages that were unearthed by massive storms out of the North Sea that are really a window back in time, places like Skara Brae. But you also have a tremendous amount of wildlife. The Gulf Stream bathes this coastline. You get razorbills, puffins, gannets by the hundreds of thousands, gray seals, Risso's dolphins, and basking sharks, the second largest fish in the sea at over 20 feet long. Then you've got this trip down the Canadian Maritimes that starts in Greenland, so you get a little bit of Greenland. You get Baffin Island, so you get the Arctic Canadian experience, crossing the mouth of the Hudson Bay down through Labrador coast, Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. You're getting a mix of Viking history, Inuit history, and also colonial history along the way. You're getting to some places that are pretty remarkable. A place like the Torngat Mountains National Park, which is the only place in the world where black bears and polar bears cohabitate. That shows you how rich and diverse that area is. You've also got the Northwest Passage, the one I'm joining on. This is the traditional Northwest Passage. We offered this in 22. This was our first year to do it. We're offering it here in 25. We'll offer it again in 26. But then as we move into 27, we've got 2 new versions of the Northwest Passage, and they're tied to this trip first, the 12-day high Arctic and Baffin Bay. And I'm really excited about this one. I pushed very hard for this itinerary because it's the closest itinerary in the Northern Hemisphere to what we do in the Antarctic. It's not going to involve a lot of villages. We'll go into Kangerlussuaq to meet the ship. We'll go over to Ponda Inlet on Baffin Island to clear into Canada, but then we leave civilization behind and we go up to the Ellesmere Islands. The Ellesmere Island is the 10th largest island in the world. It's also home to the most muskox in the world. The Inuit name for Ellesmere Island means land of the muskox, and we're going to be exploring there much like we do on the peninsula. We're not looking for any specific destination. We want to see the wild landscape of Ellesmere Island, the ice caps, the muskox, possibly even the Arctic wolves, which are there on Ellesmere Island, polar bear, narwhal, beluga, bowhead whales. Bowhead whales are a 200-plus year lived long whale. 200-plus years. Some of them are clocked at over 226 years, so they're almost as old as the United States is. A single animal has been around and living for that length of time. Unbelievable. The longest lived mammal by far. And then that will lead into our new versions of the Northwest Passage. One that will go up north over to Cambridge Bay, and another one that you see here that will go into Hudson Bay, looking at the earlier failed routes of the Northwest Passage through the Hecla and Fury Strait there in the middle of your screen. You can tie all that together with the high Arctic, the Northwest Passage, and the Canadian Maritimes. And something for the first time we're offering in 27, this has just been announced, is our first ever expedition grand voyage. This will be 94 days, or you can choose a shorter one that's 84 days. Yeah, that's a long vacation by anyone's standards. But you can literally travel from one end of the earth to the other. From the high Arctic, high north is probably 80 degrees latitude, so just 600 miles from the pole all the way to Antarctica. And you're getting there, Patrick said he went there in October, November, that early season trip. For me, everyone has their preferences, but I like the early season Antarctic experience best. I like to see the continent waking up for the austral summer. I like the fact that there's more ice there then. I spoke about the ice a minute ago, but that's those chances for ice landings are more prevalent in October, November, early December. And that's a magical moment when you can step off the ship and be a saint for the day and walk on the frozen ocean. But along the way, you're going to go through all the high Arctic latitudes, the temperate latitudes. You're going to go down in the Caribbean to places like Trinidad and Tobago, go in and see the scarlet ibis as they return to roost for the summer. Things like the silky anteater and the mangrove swamps there. Down through Brazil, the tropics. Packing for this trip will be a nightmare. But you can shop along the way, then down into Buenos Aires, into that ultimate Antarctic experience, the Falkland Islands, South Georgia, and Antarctica before you end in Ushuaia. We do make it a little easier for that packing. You saw the parka there. We've got the parka that is on all our polar trips. You get one of the parkas. On this trip, you're getting a special parka if you book the Grand Expedition with unique patches, designs, and different coloration. But on all the polar trips, you get the parka that has the liner jacket inside of it. I'm so thankful for your sakes that you're not wearing the liner jacket in this heat. That's probably enough right there to cause a sweat. You get the waterproof backpack to keep your gear safe on those Zodiac rides. In each suite, we have a pair of Swarovski binoculars, which are some of the highest end binoculars you can get. They run about $1,800 to $2,000 retail. Those are yours to use throughout the voyage. We do ask that you leave them behind. We're a successful company. We can't just give away $2,000 binoculars to every suite. We also have the boots on board, the bog boots. Some of you that have ranches and stuff, you'll probably be familiar with muck boots or bog boots. They're neoprene boots that are above the calf, so you can step off the Zodiac into the snow, into the icy water, be totally dry and insulated. Those are there for you to use on board, so you don't have to pack those. So a lot of the stuff that you would normally think are the bulkier items that you have to take with you, we've already thought of, and they're there waiting for you on the ship. So with that, I've pontificated long enough and probably gave you more information than you could possibly have expected, but I'm here for questions. Before we go into Q&A, I want to let Kristen talk about some of the offers for you, especially.
Book with those who've been there.